Hello, everybody. It's me. It's Chad, PolyNerdic, back with you for another bit of D&D content. As I promised several weeks ago, we're going to do more and more of this sort of thing. Last week, got my hands on Spelljammer. It came out last Tuesday. I want to say I had it in hand on Friday. I spent a little bit of time over the days that followed reading a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more of it. And I have some thoughts. It is not a perfect adventure setting or module, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. I could argue the price point. I got it for lower than the standard $70-ish retail price because I bought from the evil empire that is Amazon. I feel it was worth the Amazon asking price. We could argue about the price for what we got, and we're going to talk about that. But as you see here, comes in the big beautiful box. I got the standard edition. I think, in my opinion, the standard edition books are they feel a little cheaper than the traditional books. I already have the books out here in front of me. Came with a nice screen. I like the art on the screen a whole lot. But it's 364-page books, as you likely know if you're watching this. 364-page books. The Light of Xerxes, Boo's Astral Menagerie, and the Astral Adventurer's Guide. The adventure. I actually like... I don't want to say a whole lot, but I like it more than I don't. It is lacking in some things. I think there's a little too much. And this is a theme with this set in general. And of late, it feels like many people have had this complaint with 5e, that there's a lot of, the DM can figure it out. There is a collapsed star in one of the two wild space systems in the book, and I want to read, let's see. Yes, the Eye of Doom is the remains of Doom Space's sun. The swirling, lightless vortex is slowly pulling the system's planets, moons, and crystal shards into it. Each orbit around the eye brings Volt, Fyrene, Malus, and the 9 moons of N closer to the vortex. What happens to a creature or object that enters the vortex? That's up to you. That puts all of that lore and the whole concept of what happens if you go into it. Is it a black hole? Is it like a giant orb of annihilation? Is it a portal to somewhere else? It could be any or all of those things. But it should have been written in the book. That should have been definitive. At least one of them things should have been... One of them things. One of those things should have been definitively decided. And then... Or, if you would like it to be something else, make it something else. Because we all know... DM's homebrew. I don't know anybody who's ever run a module that has run it word for word. Every module I have ran, with the exception of... Well, no, not even that. When we started with the Essentials kit, I changed things. Even though it was our first session any of us had ever... It was my first time running it. It was the first session for all 3 of my players. All 4 of them. Yeah, all 4 of my players, because then we more regularly had my eldest. I change stuff. People change things. But you have to do the groundwork to make that palatable, I guess. And I feel like a lot of this adventure doesn't do that. Like, I like the episodic format. I like that, I like the art a whole lot. The art in this book is really freaking good. But that's pretty par for the course. Like, if the art were bad in a D&D book, you would hear about it. There's some great NPCs. Like, I'm a Flump fan, so Flapjack's awesome. I like that it's episodic and it's kind of serialized, and all the chapters end on like a cliffhanger point. A lot of them resolve in a fun way. when you come into it. Um, but when we get to this part in our second campaign, because that's our plan at my table, is to start a Magic School campaign and then turn it into Spelljammer, because we've had the Magic School bit planned for longer than even Spelljammer's been announced. And then we'll come to this, and then I'll have to change things, alter encounters, and all that stuff. I kind of expect that. Anytime I pick up a module, I expect it to be something that I have to edit and add to and take away from, like to make it fit my table. But a lot of this really feels like that. Like they were just like, well, they're doing it anyway, so why should we give them a full book? Let's give them this little 64-page adventure, and it goes from levels 5 to 8, which is again something I'm going to have to change when we get to it. I like the adventure though. The adventure is solid. I won't put it up there with my top tier of 5e, which I haven't even figured out yet. But it's also not the worst thing ever. It's a solid adventure. The Astral Adventurer's Guide, which is like the setting book portion of this book, I was probably the most disappointed with. We get the 6 new lineages: Thri-Kreen, Plasmoid, Hadozi, Gif, Astral Elves, Auto Gnomes. I think that was all of them, yeah. All great additions, in my opinion. I look forward to seeing Astral Elves and Plasmoids and stuff at my table when it happens. Like the art on the cover a whole lot. The covers feel weird, though, on all 3 of these books compared to the way the other covers feel. I don't know if it's a neurodivergent thing for me that I'm like, especially this bit back here. I really don't like the way this section of the book feels. But anyway, the Astrals Adventurer Guide is probably the most disappointing book in the thing, which really sucks because it's the core rules for how spelljamming works. And it's disappointing in a number of ways. There's only 2 new backgrounds. Astral, Drifter, and a Wild Spacer. There's no new subclasses. I would have loved a handful. Doesn't even need to be one for each of the new or each of the core classes, right? There doesn't need to be one for every single one of them, but there should have been at least a handful of space-themed classes. I'm sure DM's Guild will take care of that shortly. I've already seen some great stuff pop up on DM's Guild that covers some of the problems I have with this book. I've seen stuff about improving ship combat. I've seen someone created a captain's log for your ship, which is a great thing to have. I have a log for the current campaign's party's home keep that I've put together. And if your ship is kind of your traveling base, your traveling castle, your traveling fortress, you should have a log for it. That would have been a nice thing to include in the back. The art is really good. I can't fault the art at all. I love me some beholders. But this chapter on like how spelljamming works, it just kind of glosses over a lot of stuff, like the overlapping of air envelopes, gravity planes, how falling works. Traversing the astral sea really, really actually pisses me off. It's actually a thing I'm mad about in this book, because here's their depiction of what the astral sea looks like, and each of these pockets here are wild space things. If you're familiar with how 2nd edition spelljamming worked, every system, like Realm Space, where the Forgotten Realms takes place in, you had the planets in the system, and they were all encased in a crystal sphere. You get a nice nod to that with Doom Space in this book, or in the adventure book, rather. We're out of focus. My autofocus is not autofocusing. There we go. Sorry about that. I'll just keep that up on screen. over here. I think it's because I showed you art, and then it was like, oh, I can't find Shad's face. And anyway, the older editions, you traveled between the crystal spheres across the phlogiston. I've always heard it pronounced phlogiston, which is like a magical current kind of thing, to really simplify it. And you use that, and it only flowed in one direction in most places. So you had to use that to go crystal sphere to crystal sphere to crystal sphere. They've cut that out, and now you travel through the Astral Sea, hence the Astral Adventurer's Guide. But in the diagram of how it works, they show you these different wild space areas. And they talk about how the DM can create a wild space system. And then it says here, world-to-world travel requires a spelljamming ship, a teleport spell, or other kind of magic. We got that. But assuming we're doing space ship stuff, when within a wild space system, the DM must decide how long it takes a spelljamming ship to travel from world to world. Why is that not included information? You did it for 2 of the wild space systems in the adventure. And they even reference that in that book, that just go to that section of the adventure and make your own. Once again, we're back to putting the heavy lifting on the DM's shoulders. I would like to show you something that I have pulled up here. This is the ports of call from the Spelljammer Wiki from 2nd edition. And this column right here, the second column, crystal spheres. There are 61 crystal spheres detailed here. Well, listed. Not all of them are detailed. Like that one you can't click on. Right? There's 61 of them. Some of them are mentioned in this book. Like if I come down here, there's realm space. I can click on realm space, and it shows me what realm space looks like. Like, look, the sun, Anadia, Koliar, Toril, where the Forgotten Realms is, all the way out to Hakatha. That information, while it is readily available here on the internet, we shouldn't have to spend $70 on a book that doesn't give us that information, right? Like, that is a huge misstep on Wizards of the Coast part. Like, look, I want to go to Krynn space, where Dragonlance is from. Here we find out that Krynn, 3rd planet from the sun. There's only 5 planets in this system. They're spaced out differently. It wouldn't hurt to have tables and charts and stuff, you know? Like that's what I'm getting at. Like, why is this stuff not in this book? Yes, I can easily find it on the internet, but you're relaunching this setting. Give your customers, I won't even say fans, give your customers what they need. This book is not nearly enough. It's a good book. It gives you a bunch of the ships. There's a tyrant ship and stuff about the squid ship, and here's a night spider. My favorite, the Nautiloid. And it gives you the information you need on those ships, like their armor class and how many hit points they have and their damage threshold. And the damage threshold's a fun one, because last week I saw people complaining about it on TikTok, about how damage threshold isn't detailed anywhere in the book, and it isn't. It absolutely isn't. It doesn't explain what damage threshold means. That's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I think in the Saltmarsh books, because it's ships are objects. They have damage thresholds. You have to do X amount of damage before it takes damage. So, like, if the damage threshold is 15, you have to do at least 15 hit points before the object takes 15 hit points of damage. It makes sense, but it's not in this book. It doesn't even tell you that I can think of. I don't think it tells you to go to the DM's guide. Astral fishing, fun little mini game you can do. I've seen supplements on that to make that better. Yeah, I don't think anywhere in here it says. Let me find ship combat. Maybe that'll. Ship combat. Moving and steering, boarding, crashing. No, it doesn't. It doesn't touch ship combat as far as the damage threshold stuff goes. Maybe it is in Light of Xerxes when you have your first bit of ship combat. I will double check now. Ship to ship battle. No, it doesn't. Yeah, see Chapter 2 of the Astral Adventures Guide for rules on ship-to-ship engagement. That would have been a nice thing. I think less people would have been posting TikToks last week complaining about it. If it just simply said, see ship-to-ship combat rules or damage threshold, see damage threshold rules in the DMG. Since that's their style of doing things now, right? Is to just tell you to go look somewhere else. As far as like the siege weapons that are on the ships, it talks about how, like, for example, a ballista takes an action to load it, an action to aim it, and an action to fire it, and they all take 3 crew members. It's a little hazy on the writing on whether that means it's 3 turns. 1 action to load, 1 action to aim, and 1 action to fire, or is that each action for each crew member? Like that's I interpret it that way. Like, I've never done ship-to-ship combat. I've never done combat with structures. I don't think a lot of people have. I think that could be why the damage threshold thing was so confusing for a lot of people. But I think the way I read it, as a semi-experienced DM, I haven't been playing for decades. I've only been DMing for a couple years. I read it as that's the action of each crew member. So on the turn, when it's the ship's turn to go, it's doot, fire. Load it, aim it, fire it. But that's assuming you are running a crew of enough people, right? Like, I could see tables where there's, okay, I'm manning the ballista by myself. All right, so 3 turns that, I don't know. I just think it could have been a little more specific. They seem to be leaning into vagueness with this book. I'm annoyed by the whole travel between worlds thing. You have realm space. Again, assumed that you're playing in Forgotten Realms. Doom space, and then it doesn't even list on this map the wild space system that Xerxes is in, that from the story. And I'm super sorry for this light right here. I tried to cover it as much as I could, but that's where my fan is, and I'm not going to sit in here and talk about this for any amount of time without a fan on. I really like the layout that they went with. Not that the phlogiston was bad and the crystal spheres were bad, but I like this idea of once you exit a wild space system, you're in the astral sea, and then you just have to think about where you want to go, and the ship will take you there, and then then the DM gets to decide. Would it have been more helpful for more specifics in that case? Yes, but given the woo of the astral sea, it makes sense that these wild space systems that are, as they described, bobbing like corks in the ocean through the astral sea would drift apart and get closer and stuff as time travels, or as time moves on, rather. I am most annoyed with the systems bit. Like, if you're going to tell me that wild space systems exist, give me some. You don't need to put all 60 of them from Spelljammer 2nd edition, but give me some. And some details about the planets that are there. Like, what is Hakatha? What is that? I don't know. That's a word I've heard before. Let me see what it is. I'm just thankful the internet exists and I can look that information up. I've been reading Spelljammer stuff for as long as we've been playing. Um, I've never made it a secret that like 5th edition is the edition I started with. I've only been playing for just over two and a quarter, maybe close to 2.5 years. Um, I've looked at 3rd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition. I have the Spelljammer stuff, not all of it, but I have a bunch of the Spelljammer stuff from 2nd edition. Um, as soon as I found out Spelljammer was a thing, I became fascinated with it. And then when they announced it earlier this year that we were getting a 5th edition version, I was stoked because my time is limited, and not only am I planning the campaigns, and at one point I was planning 3 separate campaigns for family and friends. I need some of the stuff presented for me to work with. I do not have all the time in the world to create everything, and I think that's why the DM can figure out the travel system between worlds. Create a diagram of the planets and when they're the furthest part apart and the closest, and then that'll tell you how many days of travel you have to go. Like, just give me a chart, man. Just give me a chart. This is what realm space looks like. This is what Kryn space looks like. Gray space, Eberron space, and then some random other ones like fairy space. Canonically in Spelljammer, there's a crystal sphere or a wild space system now out there that is dominated by a giant tree. That the planets and the suns and the stars and stuff are hanging on this giant tree, and canonically you can walk planet to planet. That is incredibly quirky and awesome and weird and exactly what Spelljammer should be, and it's not in the new book. DM's Guild and the internet is going to be the savior of this setting. And it's just because of how wishy-washy and non-committal and kind of half-baked this book is. As I said, there's no new subclasses. There's only 2 new spells. Air Bubble and Create Spelljamming Helm. Both really important for space travel, I would say. Since you have to have a Spelljamming Helm to Spelljam, and you kind of want an air bubble on your head for 24 hours if you're gonna be out in space and risk getting bumped off your ship. Air Bubble's a 2nd level spell. Takes 1 action, lasts 24 hours. And then when you cast it at higher levels, you can create additional air bubbles. So like if you cast it at 3rd level, you get 2 air bubbles. The Spelljamming Helm spell, you have to have a crystal rod worth at least 5,000 gold, and that you touch to a large or smaller chair that is unoccupied, and it creates a Spelljamming Helm. And it gives a couple examples of like this scorpion-tailed one, and this more ornate-looking one, and this funky-looking one that I like the color of. And the implication being that the crystal rod is absorbed and comes back out down here as the source of magic that floats the chair. And then the magic items, there's only 3. 4 if you count the one that's in the adventure that isn't meant for humanoids to use because it's an item specific to a creature, an enemy type. But the fish suit, the Spelljamming Helm, and the Wild Space Orrery. I like the Wild Space Orrery as an item, but again, it's how half-baked is it that you put out a new setting? This is literally a setting book, and you don't have more stuff in it. More like, the Eberron book gave us artificers. That's a whole new class, not even a subclass. Large Luigi's in it. Spoilers. That makes me happy too. I love non-hostile beholders. Just beautiful ship art. 16, I think, is what I counted ships in this book. Again, there's other ships out there in older materials. And then the final bit of the book is the Rock of Brawl, which is like a cool space village on an asteroid. turtle ship's really nice. I like the turtle ship. But the bit about the Rock of Brawl is interesting as far as it being a setting, and of course, like I said, large Luigi. The most disappointing of the 3 books, in my opinion. And largely based on the criticism I've already levied against it. Like, it's cool that they lay out ships and how they work and what they look like and all that stuff. Their weapons, how many people you need to crew them, what they're worth. Can they or can't they land on the ground, I think is in there. Although it's a very common theme that they'll roll over. Yeah, night spiders are designed for space travel alone and can't float on water or land safely on the ground because the weight of the ship would snap its legs. Nautiloid can't float or land. The living ship can land in water but not the ground. Not a perfect book at all. Definitely lacking in stuff. And then the final book, Boo's Astral Menagerie. We get some interesting monsters to go with the ones that were put out for free. Some revisited monsters like the Githyanki. The GIF. They do make a horrible joke about GIF in here. The Fear. And the Gaj. Giant bug. Giant nightmare monster. The Auto Gnomes. The Braxit. Astral Elves. I'm going to call that Artuks, the giant starfish people that are plants. The Kandori and the Jammer Leeches. Lunar Dragon. Can't be Dungeons and Dragons without dragons. Solar Dragon. The Rygar. The androgynous cephalopod folk who can change colors and who have the other magic item, the Talarith, which allows them to create a golem. This is an interesting one here, the Mercane. They were called the Arcane in 2nd edition. I'm fine with the name change, really. One of the more comical name changes, though. We got the Dowar, the Penguin Folk. I already found on Dungeon Masters Guild. Playable Dowar race if you want to be a Penguin Folk. The Eyemonger here. He's also on one of the other books. Oh yeah, he's back here on this one. There's an Eyemonger there. I think the Eyemonger, I have not seen confirmation of this yet. But there used to be a monster in 2nd edition called an Aster Eater, which was a beholderkin that looked like an asteroid. And it doesn't explicitly state that this is a beholderkin. It is an aberration, and it does have an anti-magic gullet. It doesn't produce a cone out of its eye that eliminates magic. And even it says here, although an Eyemonger doesn't project an anti-magic cone from its eye as a beholder does. So they kind of link them. Aster Eater is a much funnier name than Eyemonger, but I can understand why they changed it. Because of what Aster Eater sounds like. Vampirates, of course. Space Clowns. You got Vampirates right there. There's a really interesting one that shows up in the adventure. Starlight Apparitions. There was a similar creature in 2nd edition, too. Giant Space Hamsters. My youngest loves those. I'm going to have to get that mini just for him to see it. Space Clowns. The Astral Menagerie is a bestiary. It's cool. It's got space stuff in it. A lot of the encounters that I've seen written for this, like here's the ship encounter tables, and you're like, okay, Astral Sea encounters. 1 Cosmic Horror. 1 Githyanki Knight mounted on a young red dragon. A Mercane and a Beholder bodyguard. a Pentadrone, a Planetar, some Modrons, Grey Slotty, Solar, Unicorns. So like even the encounter tables they provide, it give you stuff that's outside of that book because it's only like 60 creatures. I think this is a solid set. I'll go back and say, since we've kind of covered it all, it's a solid box set. It's not terrible by any escape of the imagination, but I do feel like it is half-baked. I think the decision to do 3 64-page books was a bad one. I think that resulted in some rushed work and some things being cut and left on the editing floor. I've learned over the last couple of years how much the folks at Wizards of the Coast love to leave things on the editing room floor, or cut things for space. The Candlekeep book had a lot of stuff. A lot of the people that wrote adventures in the Candlekeep book were very open on Twitter about their displeasure with some of the stuff that got cut. I fear that the Spelljammer books here may have gone through a similar space saving. Like, oh, we can't have... The books are 64 pages apiece. They have to be 64 pages apiece. We have to cut information. So let's just limit whole sections that should be whole chapters even to a paragraph. Let's not create subclasses. Let's not create new spells and items and stuff. Let's leave all that on the table. And then you go and you look at like the Space Clowns have guns that aren't normal D&D guns. Why are they not detailed somewhere other than in the Space Clown stat block? All stuff that is easy to tinker with and add to and fix to make it work for your table, but also stuff that should have just been in the book. Because like when I was talking to my players about it, for example, the Eberron book. It's a pretty hefty tome. It is 320 pages. That's a setting book right there. The Adventurer's Guide, the Astral Adventurer's Guide should have been 300 pages. Or at the very least, we could have got the Menagerie and the Adventurer's Guide together. That's only 128 pages, those page counts. That's 100 more. That's 50 more pages for creatures and fleshing out the rules and the ships and stuff between the two books. If you add the Astrals Adventurer's Guide and Boo's Menagerie together, you still have 100 pages left over for details if you want a book that's this size. Retail price is $50 for the Eberron book. Retail price for this was like $70 at my friendly local game store. As far as settings go, this has more information in it than this does. And the book feels better too. Third party. One has to look no further than Kobold Press to see how to do settings for their Midgard setting and all that. Kobold Press puts out excellent setting books. Critical Role put out the Taldori campaign guide, which I finally got my hands on a physical copy of. It's just over 300 pages, or just under, excuse me. It is 278 pages. Did I look at that right? Sorry, 280. 2-page difference. This is a good setting book. Hell, they're the Wildmount book that D&D themselves put out. I don't know why I went so high when I said put out. Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. another good setting book comes in at 304 pages. This is how you do a setting book. And this is what I wanted with Spelljammer. Only the most professional quality here as I slide back and forth and reach off my bookshelf here. By no escape of the imagination, my saying Spelljammer Adventures in Space is bad. I like it. I'm happy I have it. I look forward to playing in this space. You know, I look forward to spending time crafting a story for my players, using this settings information and the stuff I get off the internet. I just wish I didn't have to get so much off the internet to fill it up. You know? Because by the time we get to Spelljammer, the players will be level 10. Based on the way the campaign is mapped out so far for our second campaign. So they'll be over-leveled for it. We've done that before. When I adapted Descent into Avernus into our campaign that we're about to wrap up, the players were over-leveled for it too. So we breezed through some of the early stuff, and then once we were down in Avernus, we were able to, meet the challenge, so to speak. Of the players themselves being so highly leveled. I'm just moderately disappointed in what they gave us with Spelljammer. It could have been so much more. There could have been so much more information, so much more stuff to work with. And that is evident by how much stuff is on the internet. You know, like, Spelljammer was so rich with lore in second edition, and they just kind of dropped the ball here, and it's upsetting. It was easy to get super hyped for it and be excited because Spelljammer is finally confirmed. Like, we spent 8 years, I think, total. I mean, obviously I didn't, but people that enjoyed Spelljammer and enjoyed 5e spent 8 years waiting for it, and when it finally arrives, I can only imagine how disappointed they must be, because I've only known Spelljammer existed for 2 years, and looking at what was and what is now in front of me, and all the stuff that just kind of got thrown aside, and I'm not even talking about renaming stuff, because that happens. But yeah, it should have been this. You know, they could have done a box set with a nice screen and an adventure. You know, the adventure could have been slightly longer too. 64 pages is all right, but it could have been a longer adventure book. Because, again, let me just grab an adventure. Since we talked about it, Descent into Avernus is a 256-page book itself. So they could have done much more than they did. And for whatever reason, they chose not to. Now I've got a disaster over here as my books are falling over. Lean back, please. Inanimate objects, listen to me. Alright. So, I don't put scores on things like this. I think it's worth owning. Maybe not at the full price point. And certainly not if you're not willing to do extra work. Like, it seems more and more often now that we're seeing D&D put stuff out there. Wizards of the Coast is putting stuff out there that isn't for you if you don't have the time and the energy to give it extra. You know? Like, I was looking through the Mwangi Expanse book for Pathfinder 2nd edition the other day, and it is just loaded with lore. They have the Traveler's Guide to Lost Omens coming out, and it's just full of all this fun fluff and information about the cultures. You know, it's talking about the foods they eat, the games they play, and all this stuff. We're fast approaching 50 years of D&D. The Forgotten Realms alone has existed for the vast majority of that time. There's so much lore, so much just meaty, just stuff you can sink your teeth into, that Wizards of the Coast seems completely and totally uninterested in utilizing. And Spelljammer is a perfect example of it. I mean, I showed you 61 crystal spheres. Make that modern. 61 wild space areas that could have been utilized, and there's not a mention of one of them. Like I said, it even says in the adventure, or did I say that? I don't remember if I mentioned it. In the freaking adventure, there's a cartographer character, and it's mentioned that they have maps for over 42 systems. They mention the existence of 42 systems, and they give you none of them. Because the 2 systems that are in the book, she doesn't have. She doesn't have a Doomspace map or a Xerxes map. She has 42 other ones that are completely useless to you. That's a huge, like that is my biggest gripe with the whole book. Like, I don't like that there's not classes, subclasses, and I don't like that there's not more magic items, magic spells. But to throw out that little juicy nugget of information. Oh yeah, I've got 42 maps for systems out there. Wild space systems out there in the Astral Sea. I've got 42 of them, but I'm not going to tell you a damn word about any of them. So that's my takeaway as we hit 40 minutes of me babbling about this, is that it's a good book. It's got good stuff in it. There's good monsters. There's a good quest. There's good ideas. There's cool ships. There's the bare bones of ship-to-ship combat and how to run that. But it could have been better. It could have been better. And that's my takeaway for you. That's what I want you to take away is that it's a fine book. It serves its function to a point. If you're going to run stuff in it, you're going to have to do extra work. And I guess that's something we expect. But the foundation's there. They at least did that much. As disheartening as that might be. So it's not terrible. It's worth owning. But just know that where this semi-experienced DM sits, it gave you some work to do. You know, what happens if you go in the Eye of Doom? What happens? Could be anything. We don't know. And that's kind of the general vibe of the whole book. So, I hope you enjoy your spell jamming with your players, or not, if you choose not to. I know I'm excited to build some stuff in that setting. So, I'll see you soon. I'm going to upload this to YouTube right now, and by the time it's uploaded, I'll be live on Twitch. So, if you see this, and you want to watch me play some video games, I'll be on Twitch. If not, I'll see you next time I talk about some D&D stuff here on PolyNerdic.com, PolyNerdic on YouTube, and like, follow, and subscribe. You know the drill. You've been around the internet. Till next time.